How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great dialogue coming our way today. We're going to talk about the best placements for metal detectors, and we have a lot of locations to discuss. And I'm going to have Russ Hamilton in, and with our partnership today, we're going to discuss all the locations, yes, but we're also going to discuss why they need to be placed in those locations. So it's going to be a great dialogue. I want to tell you that this dialogue is sponsored to you by three entities. We have American Military University. Guys, if you're looking for a higher degree, you're looking to go back to college, a great online school, check out American Military University. They're very supportive of what we do in corrections and also what we do on Tier Talk. And we also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit GuardianRFID.com for more information. And guys, if you get a chance, check out their YouTube channel. They got a lot of good videos that we also promote content for or produce content for. So if you guys get a chance, please check it out. And we also have Ceia-USA. Now, mind you guys, the spelling of that is C-E-I-A, but it's pronounced Ceia. Now, Ceia is the world's leading weapon, cell phone, and contraband detection system manufacturer for corrections. For more information, contact Joe Vasquez at 440-561-7615. He's a subject matter expert. He's passionate about our industry, and he will take good care of you if you are looking for metal detectors or any type of contraband finding device. They can help, and tell them Tier Talk sent you. And then they could add a little bit more of some help, I hope. I'm just kind of putting that in there. Well, but I'm assuming Joe will help us out. Russ, what's up, Russ? How is everything, my brother?
Everything is great here, Anthony. Glad to have a chance to come in here and tear this topic apart and, provide some people some insights on what they need to know with regards to, keeping your facility safe, keeping your personnel safer.
Contraband free, if you will. Now, Russ, what I thought I could do is I have a list of locations that I thought we could talk through first briefly. And then if you think of any other ones after I've gone through the list, by all means, please add them. I've come up with this exhaustive list. I think I've hit up most areas. But if you could think outside the box and think of another area, that's what we do here. So again, guys, this is going to be a list of best places to place your metal detectors. And guys, in the next episode, a few weeks down, when we discuss this again, we're going to talk about floating metal detectors. And then we're going to have another dialogue down the line, too, with tips for civilians going through metal detectors. So, again, we'll be producing them as we move forward. Now, the first spot I got, Russ, is the exterior entrances of the facility. What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so, this one's just the most natural one to think about. We have to protect the perimeter of an institution at all costs. There is absolutely, zero tolerance for letting anything get past there, but especially something as, dangerous or lethal as a gun could be. There have been instances at some places in the past where that's occurred, and it always remains a great danger to staff because, that gun is going to be used and used pretty quickly if someone does try and smuggle that in there. Usually we think about it in terms of a potential jailbreak, actually doing an assassination or something like that, but especially with regards to escaping. And, that's the one thing that we're really supposed to be the best at in corrections is that public safety facet of keeping people from getting out of our facility. And so that one alone is key, and work the effort to make sure that we have that particular part of our policy and procedure dialed into the point that that's not going to be a failure spot.
Yeah, and guys, there are some facilities now because, last couple of years we did have a rise in active shooters. So you have a lot of correctional facilities right now that, yeah, we have our codes on the inside, but we're also worried about codes that can come from the outside, which is an active shooter. So they have generated codes that tell staff we have an active shooter on the premise. So again, what helps them through that is definitely having metal detectors that kind of put a barrier between what can come in from the public into a correctional facility. So that's the barrier between the public and the prison or the jail. Now, mind you, I would also like to add this as well to that. Between the front offices and the main facility, there's a lot of facilities I know, real quick, Russ, that they got the metal detectors in place for when you get ready to go into the controlled compound. And obviously, we get that. We know that's needed. But a lot of them don't have any metal detectors between, let's say, the entrance and the front offices where we have our administrative staff, where we have our civilian personnel. I mean, God forbid we do have an active shooter. It could be someone that's disgruntled from being removed. And I feel that there are some facilities that do. In order for you to make it up to the admin office or whatever it is, there is a metal detector. But there are some facilities that don't have that. And what happens is it's direct access unhindered to the upper echelon of the running of that facility. Have you ever seen that before, Russ?
Yeah, there's always a potential there. And, it's not just from necessarily someone who's disgruntled. It just has to be someone who's looking for a soft target. They may have some other beef to grind against corrections, if you will, something to do with a loved one that they have inside, something to potentially do with, the way that they feel that they were treated before. And so rather than go in and try and attack a more hardened target where we have some of those physical security features, they think, maybe they can just, walk down, the old mahogany row, as they used to call some of these places, and pick off people who are neither armed nor behind any of those secure physical features. So that has to be a concern, because we know that, the reason that we call it terror is because it's terrifying to those people who are helpless in a situation like that, where they're at work and there's potential for a flashpoint from some of those, heated ideas that sometimes take hold in some of those people.
Yeah, and guys, be advised, I know that we all could be victim of being a target, but if you leave direct access to the higher level of management, that could have a bad influence on that correctional facility. So having said that, it's always good to make sure that we do all efforts to protect all staff, including the upper level as well, to not provide a barrier between the public and the upper level. To me, that is a concern. So again, we all require some level of protection. Okay, so we also have entrances to the shoe or the seg. So real quick, Russ, I mean, this to me is, lower level going into a higher level part of the facility. It's always good to have a metal detector in between any lower level to a higher level, because again, lower level has less restrictions. So putting a metal detector in between hopefully eliminates some of the contraband that can come from a lower level part of the facility. Would you agree?
Yeah, this is one of the situations that people on the outside may not understand so much. But, we have people in general population units that are, constantly one way or another trying to move information or items from the general population into some of those more secure units. Now, some of those things, obviously, we're going to have more difficulty catching, like small notes, maybe hit lists, maybe drugs and some things of that nature. But some of the more scary items, like, potentially knives, shanks, and things, if they're made out of metal, that's an area that we really have to attack that, because we don't want those things getting inside, because that, once again, it's another potential flashpoint. It's another potential place where those kind of incidents of violence occur a lot, if they're able to get those things in there. Some of the units I've worked in, it was always difficult, because they would make a shank out of nearly anything. But some of those things, by making them and forcing them to use plastic or wrappers off of cookies and some of the crazy stuff that I saw over the years, means that they're going to be less efficient in actually carrying out some of the threats against staff and some of the hits against inmates. So we definitely want to make sure that we at least have something to get the metal at that point, should someone be sent on one of those so-called suicide type missions.
Yeah, and guys, most of the inmates that work in the RHU and SEG units are usually lower level inmates that have access to greater level things. So they need to have that security check in mind, because they are going to go into those facilities. And believe it or not, those inmate workers that come from those lower level areas are usually responsible for a lot of the contraband that's found in the SHU and the SEG areas. One, because you could have people that are inmates that are still connected to the gangs and kind of being ordered to bring stuff in, so they manipulate themselves into a job, and or they can get inmates that are easily manipulated, weak inmates like sexual predators who can usually easily be manipulated by the population. That's why when you're filtering for these jobs, for these porters or stuff like that, or kitchen workers or people that have access to the SHU or SEG area, be very particular in who you pick for those jobs. You really don't want them to have any type of gang relations, and you really don't want them to be an inmate that they can push around. For me, even though they're harder to get to want to work in those positions, I usually look for the senior inmates, the inmates that are kind of just older and more veteran, if you will. But again, you got to be very careful of who you assign to those areas, because one, they could be motivated to bring stuff in, or they could be bullied to bring stuff in. So again, definitely need a metal detector there. All right, so let me go with one of Russ's favorites, even though, well, actually, no, this would actually be a good thing. I apologize. Yeah, I have no even though, because we've had discussions in the past about people, officers and staff kind of walking in these areas, because now I figure we have cameras that we can kind of monitor things from afar. I'm going to bring Russ into some old school stuff. Russ is going to love this. Entrance to the rec yard.
Okay, yeah, that's one of those things where, a lot of times we would have inner perimeter fencing, around an area of the yard where we were trying to have a choke point in order to stop weapons from coming through. A lot of times we didn't have anything as nice and fancy as some metal detectors back then, except for maybe a handheld wand. And so, we would basically be going at it with hands on, patting them down, which is something we would have to do even with a metal detector. But there's always the chance that a metal detector might be the only thing that's actually going to detect that, considering where they're most likely to hide those weapons. So, kind of the game plan is to try and keep them from getting the metal weapons out there. And some of those other weapons, the plastic, the cookie wrappers, the newspapers wrapped in sugar coatings and things like that, we could kind of, live with them getting out there. We'd always try and stop them, but metal was a definite no-no. So that's one place where I would love to have it, where you could just have someone walk on through, and if they're setting it off, start looking for exactly where it shows that piece of metal was at on them, maybe even cuff them up before you start anything, because some of these guys are going to try, even if they're 99% sure that they're going to get caught.
Yeah, guys, obviously this is before they enter in the yard, because once they're in the yard, it's harder for us to respond to that. So this has to be obviously just right by the entrance. And then obviously, as they exit out the same way, we could also catch it. So if we do catch an inmate that may have something, we could immediately shut the yard and put our focus on the one or two inmates that seem to have some level of contraband. You know what's funny? I mentioned centralized areas. I should have put the rec in that as well. I kind of separated that for some reason. But let's not forget mess halls, chapel, school, programming, and the gym. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? Other centralized areas. So what I mean by centralized areas, guys, for people on the outside looking in, it's where inmates can congregate. So obviously, there are some facilities that have centralized feeding. They can meet together at the chapel. Again, they can meet together at the school where they have programming. They can meet at the gym, which, by the way, a lot of gyms in the correctional facilities do have free weights. So, I mean, obviously, that's a ball game for contraband right there. But what's your thoughts on the centralized areas? Did I miss any?
No, I think it's kind of okay to just treat that as a general area. The thing that we always look for there is the fact that there is going to be a large amount of congregation that's going to take place. And when that happens, sooner or later, you're going to put, warring factions, be it Crips and Bloods or skinheads and blacks, whatever it is. they're going to be in a position where they might feel that they need to go in there armed for self-protection, or that they need to go in there armed in order to carry out some kind of attack. So the best thing for us to do overall is just to prevent that in the first place, to keep those areas from getting taken over, because those would tend to be softer target areas. Those are areas where not only the inmates congregate, but free staff too, who don't have as much training, equipment, and exposure to those types of incidents to be able to control it. So, that goes without saying almost, if you just think about hard target areas versus soft target areas. And so that's what you have in those types of parts of the facility.
Yeah, and guys, there is some facilities may operate different than others. When you have a centralized area like a mess hall, maybe even a chapel, or let's say the rec we mentioned before, or a gym, some actually the inmates are locked in and secured. So obviously, right before you go in, you want to make sure that they're not bringing anything in or definitely taking anything out. So the same control method we talk about in the rec. But there are still some old school facilities that do have staff walking around the mess halls, walking around the chapel, severely outnumbered, by the way. But having said that, so for their own protection, for the staff that's in there, they're trusting on those metal detectors. Trust and believe. They're trusting on the control effort in and then obviously the control effort out. So definitely a very important place to put a metal detector. Okay, Russ, we had a discussion on this recently, so let's add the Sallyport.
Okay, yeah, this is one of those areas that unfortunately a lot of tragedies unfold in. Sallyport provides us with two things. It provides us with, excuse me, with a level of comfort that we believe we're close to home, we're right there, and so it's time to drop our guard, which is a bad thing. But the thing that it provides inmates with is they are very close usually at that point to that outside perimeter, where they, instead of having to breach 3 or 4 different physical barriers, they only have to breach one. And so that's the point at which time they'll often take, mad gamble risks, things that you and I would never do. And that's the time where they want to try and do that. I've seen cases, where you have inmates that have handcuff keys secreted on them, whether it's in their hair or in a bodily orifice. And if they bring those things to the inside, it gives those other inmates a chance to maybe get a hold of that stuff and try and bring it back to the outside in order to make one of those breaks of freedom. So that's important. The other thing to keep in mind is if they are going to make some kind of escape attempt, will they bring weapons with them? Well, if they get a chance, yes. So if those are metallic weapons of any kind, hopefully we would be able to interdict that. And it's just a place that you have to be on guard, because the potential for doing something there is high, and the potential for things that they can use, like for instance, cars and things like that, as a battering ram in order to try and get through that last ditch perimeter. It's a scary thought, and I've seen too many incidents of it on YouTube and so forth. Go Google it for yourselves, but it's a bad idea to not have a metal detector there, because there are things that you could potentially interdict.
Yeah, and Sallyports are usually could be another entrance area. So again, we're focused on staff. Another good point to show that ID, and God forbid you lose it in the facility. It's always good to kind of show your ID at every checkpoint. So God forbid you do lose it, you can narrow it down in between checkpoints. Hopefully that's something that's enforced. But for the Sallyport, another good thing about these metal detectors, at least for staff, is sometimes we may forget what we have on us when we switch from area to area. There may be certain things that you shouldn't have on you, and certain things that you can. So these Sallyports, if they got the metal detector and it's doing what it's supposed to do, sometimes it can remind you about that little bobby pin that you have in your hair, or the lock from the let's say the my mind's going blank, Russ. Help me out. The shackles the lock from the shackles that you put on your belt, that when you turned in the shackles, you forgot to turn in the padlock. It happens.
Or you're about to take some keys home.
Or you're about ready to take, right when you're leaving. So these little things are good. So again, you know what? That's another good reason to kind of, I know we don't go through the Sally. I know when we're leaving, we may not necessarily go through those metal detectors, because at that point we're looking to go out. But it's not a bad thing to do all the time. But having said that, you don't want to tie up traffic coming in. So, but again, at least for going in, it's a good point to maybe catch on the little things that you may not be thinking about. Like Russ even said, what about if you're going into an area and you do have the unit keys? Now you're going into the AgSeg unit with keys that should not be there. You know what I mean? So it's good to, have those metal detectors in between checkpoints to obviously stop contraband, but we're human as well. And sometimes we make mistakes and we could have stuff on us that's not permitted. So it's a good way for us to police each other. Okay, Russ, so I got more. Let's see. We got now, I think this is a good one, by medical, especially for the workers to pass through as well. So what's your thoughts on medical? Very, very risky area.
Yeah, that's another way that inmates will often use to try and have somebody bring something in. And I'm not saying that medical's any worse than anyone else, but the fact is that they have a lot of access, and they may have things on them that they're failing to think about, especially items that might be metal and might be used as some kind of weapon stock down the way. And it's simply a matter of fact that they don't live in the same world that we do, and they don't view some of the things that we view as risky. And so, sometimes if we just have a reason to say, hey, why did you set the metal detector off, and bring that to their attention, that they do have something in their hair, that they do have, maybe a little bit too much metal on some kind of a necklace that could potentially, be made into a handcuff key or used as a makeshift weapon of some type. So, you know what? Any of those places, it's good to have. Plus, some of the things that we've got that are going on in medical, scalpels, medical tools, needles, that kind of thing. We want to stop those things from exiting. And it's easy to have things in your pocket. It's easy for some people that, aren't as honest as they should be to move things out of there.
Right. And obviously, we're all familiar with the word sharps if you work in corrections. So, I mean, keeping track of those. And mind you, guys, besides the metal detector, we're also supporting these with strips as well. If we feel the risk is so great, the metal detectors are usually backups, to what we're going to do as a strip. Like I know for a fact, if you work in medical, you're going to be stripped, you should be stripped from part A, from whatever it is, position A to position B, wherever you got to go. That's an area where, because there's so much contraband that could be brought back to the respective units, usually inmates will be stripped before going back to their respective unit. And also, when you work in like an AgSeg, an RHU, stuff like that, the inmates that are going in could be stripped before they go in. Again, because there's a chance that they could present contraband into that area, which is a very restricted area. You got to put all efforts in place. So that effort would include a strip and a metal detector or a boss chair or whatever it is. Especially if, and actually we'll get to this one now, but guys, the big thing here is your medical workers. That's why also, guys, be very wary of this. I know metal detectors can't test everything, but for me, if you want to work in medical, you can't have a drug history. I don't care how small it is. I don't care if it was even dismissed at one point. You don't want anybody that has the potential to reach for that drugs or grab that impulse, because it could happen. So again, always be careful of who you filter in to those work areas. Now, Russ, I got this one. I think this is interesting too. So entrance to a housing unit or support building. Now, what I mean by support building, real quick, because a lot of people may not know what that means. It could be, let's say, outside of a Fullman area, that the inmates that are on an outside detail go out from and report back to. So the support building is where we put together our outside details to send them out into the community and do the job. So I would definitely expect metal detectors, inmates. By the way, these inmates are going to be stripped regardless, because again, their access to contraband is heightened because they're going out to community. But don't forget, the officer that's taking them out there, there's a risk for them, because they're going to be traveling out there with these inmates in these vehicles by some huge numbers. So we want them to, one, be stripped, because all these inmates are getting stripped going out and coming back. But the metal detector also helps us, just in case we miss something on a strip, we can make sure that the facility has that other fail-safe method. So Russ, what's your thoughts about the housing units? Interesting, because that was mentioned by some when I posted up the poll, but because that may be a little tougher, but doesn't mean it can't be done, maybe at smaller jails or facilities. But what about the support building where you have the outside details coming out and going in?
Yeah, you want to be really careful on what inmates are allowed to take out with them, especially if it might allow them to, either attack staff or the public, or secondly, in order to try and coordinate or facilitate some type of escape attempt. So the things that I think about with that are either, keys and things to potential handcuffs, although support workers, they're not going to be handcuffed or restrained out there, though they might be afraid that they're going to be at some point. So they could have something on them. They might be moving something for someone else to use at a potential point out there. Maybe if they're going out there, and they shouldn't be doing this, but I see places do it all the time, where they have people out there washing the cars or cleaning out the insides. They could be moving that type of contraband from inside to outside for a potential escape attempt. But the other thing that I think about with outside work detail crews, if they're going out there and picking up trash on the road or something, is they might want to try and take a cell phone out with them in order for them to try and meet up with someone who's going to get them out of there in a hurry. So all those things are concerning, because just because it's a potential non-violent escape doesn't mean it may not turn into something else, or they may not try and hurt us or attack us for who knows what reason.
Now, real quick, for the entrance to the housing units, if the housing units are separated, maybe I get it. But if you have one centralized metal detector that they can go through that takes them directly to their housing unit, the placement of the centralized metal detector may serve its purpose. But if you have, any time where there's a separation between the metal detector and where that inmate's got to go to, if you can employ another metal detector, I get it, because I've seen facilities that do that. But if there's not, if it's just I go through this metal detector and I break off this way and that's my unit, then okay, one centralized may work. But if it's like I go through this metal detector and then I go down here and then I go down here and around here and up that way and there's my unit, yeah, well, then maybe you may need one in front of the unit, because look at all the areas where they can pick up something. But Russ, what's your thoughts real quick? Because that was mentioned, but I could see that maybe, like, as again, if the unit, I kind of said it backwards the first time, but if the facility's spread out and, any centralized metal detector does not have a way to filter all inmates to the different units. But if you're, if the facility's more compact, then maybe the centralized metal detector could serve a purpose, and that's maybe all you need. You may not need one in every housing unit. But what's your thoughts on that, Russ? Because that was kind of a little bit of a debate on the board.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where if inmates are egressing from an area and you're trying to catch them right there with a metal detector, but they're going through other areas where there's other potential for them to pick up contraband and to continue to move it, or maybe it's part of a train that they're trying to run to different areas, you might have to have separate and unique points, or at least ways to funnel them back through areas so that you can make sure that they're clean when they get back to wherever that housing unit is. So it's kind of difficult to describe. I think most of us out there understand that we just want to make sure that when they go from one dangerous area to another dangerous area, that at some point they've been cleaned.
Yeah, now let's got three more locations. So let's do this one next, the visit area or the visit room entry. Obviously, again, it's something with the public having access to the facility, but also the inmates having access to the public. So, Russ, what's the need for a metal detector in those areas?
Well, so that's another big one, because that's a flashpoint. That's where you have, loved ones who are potentially willing to do anything to break someone out, or where maybe they feel that they've been jilted and they want to kill that individual. I mean, stranger things have happened. I mean, after all, it's prisons and jails.
Wait. Did you just say a metal detector can protect the inmates? Is that what you just said?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we never know who's acting under, what type of motivation. So we go from a point where everyone that comes into that visiting area has to be searched. And whether that's just a metal detector or some more intrusive ways, we have to make sure that individual, first and foremost, is not carrying a weapon. And so that's one of the ways that we get them in there clean, and we make sure that no type of prison break or jilted lover scenario or just, God forbid, another mass shooting happens.
And I want to add something else to that too. So obviously, and I'm sure kind of Russ touched on this too, but obviously this is going to be a big spot where we're going to have one of our greatest concerns, because this is where, we do have some interaction, in some case, some contact between the visitors, which is the public, and the inmates. So again, eliminating what you can, the contraband that could come in. Again, I like what Russ said, the protection of the inmate, but also, they could smuggle stuff to visitors, but also what the inmates can take from the visit hall back to their respective units. So again, this is an ideal placement because this is definitely, to me, just as dangerous as having inmates out in the community working. You definitely need that metal detector there because, again, this is where the public has direct connection with the inmates. So whatever perspective you want to take it from, there is a risk, risk coming in or a risk when the visit's done and the inmate's going to take whatever he can back to the unit. All right. So, okay, Russ, let's go to kitchen. Same thing as medical, sort of, but kitchen. And by the way, for me, when I look for a kitchen worker, they can't have any charges that involve the use of a knife. Big fan of that one. But go ahead, Russ. What about for kitchen workers?
Okay, so yeah, this one, I mean, it should be self-evident, but you know what? Everyone always thinks, though, the first thing about, well, because there's knives in the kitchen. Yes, those are there. Yes, those are a concern. Is that probably my main concern? Probably not, because what happens is, as you're having these guys come in and then egress later on from that kitchen, what else is there in the kitchen? Well, there's little pieces of flashing. There's little wires on grills and things in there. You've got mixing utensils that have, great big pieces of wire that, the food passes through. All of those things can be made into weapons. And so that's one area where they actually have a really good chance of scoring a really good piece of weapon stock, be it round, flat, square, whatever, and trying to move it back to a yard where there's going to be some nefarious things done with that to make it into a good weapon and potentially harm one of us, potentially harm one of them. So the knives that we think about in there, yeah, those are important, but we can track each and every one of those. It's much harder to try and track things like those wires that are on trays and grills and things in there, or things that are up in ceiling fans or wire whisks and those kind of things. So trying to stop that from moving back out is paramount because there's so much of it in there. And if we don't watch it, we'll lose track of who's going in, who's going out, and what's missing at that moment in time.
Yeah, and I want to add something with the kitchen workers. Obviously, there's a lot of kitchen workers. It may be very hard to strip every single one. So obviously, before you even think about sending inmates back, you make sure all your tools are there. That's the first thing the officer should be doing, is making sure all the tools are there. Obviously, the metal detector is a big fail-safe for us because that may be the only resource we have. It's a little bit different than hospital porters. They may not be that many. But kitchen workers, there's going to be a lot because you're serving thousands of meals a day. So having said that, you may not be able to strip all the kitchen workers unless there's a need to. So again, check for your tools, whatever. If all the tools are there, then the fail-safe becomes a metal detector. Now, if the tools are not there, we're stripping. I would also recommend, because of the sensitivity of those kitchen tools, that if possible, depending on the status, you kind of limit the workers of whoever worked the kitchen to one particular housing unit, if possible. It's not always possible, but if possible, think about this. If we lose a tool, we know it's between point A and point B. So where the kitchen workers tend to work, if they're working in that one area, not a bad idea to put a metal detector there as well. So you can kind of catch things in the middle. That's my idea. It's something I've pushed for, I work on. So basically, again, it's a great fail-safe to have it if you can have a dedicated housing unit for the kitchen workers, because this is contraband that you do not want to lose whatsoever. So again, a way to keep track of that would be, the metal detector, because again, you may be able to strip them all, and there may be another metal detector at the housing unit where they need to go to, because that's designated as their living area. And on top of that, well, Russ, do you agree with that? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in most places that I've worked, once they're out of that kitchen, it could pretty much go anywhere. I do see though where if you had more control over that type of movement to shunt people to only where they're going, it would be helpful. It's just it's very hard to say. Every facility is unique. The main thing that I can tell you is that if you're writing policy and procedure, try and think of those things ahead of time so that you think about, well, what if I do lose something? What can I do about that? So that's a potential one, having people more centrally located that are going to be there. It may help, it may not, but that's just part of what you have to put into it, because it's a thinking game.
It is. And again, it helps to limit if possible. I mean, it's not always going to be possible, but if possible, I think that is a great idea. I actually had two more areas, Russ. I apologize. There's two. I missed the other one. So obviously, this one's a common one: maintenance areas, tool sheds, etc. Russ, you want to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, that's kind of one of those areas where a lot of times maintenance areas will be like located next to vocations or that type of thing, because sometimes they might interchange tools. Sometimes they just might all have tools in one central location. So you've got things like carts and people and potentially even vehicles and so forth moving in and out of there. It's one more choke point that we have to make sure that we secure absolutely. For those that aren't aware, it was just a little bit more than a year ago in Iowa. Those inmates, two of them stole some tools, and it ended up costing two staff members their lives as they were beat to death with hammers because they posed as part of the maintenance crew. So somewhere along the way, there should have been a way to check whether those inmates had those tools. I don't know if a metal detector would have helped in that situation or not, but you can damn sure bet that there's some situation out there where it would have helped.
Yeah, now, guys, a lot of facilities do have tools that aren't always coming from the outside. They may be safely placed in the facility in case there needs to be immediate work done. Again, those areas should also have, besides a metal detector, like a counter or something, a logbook, so you keep track of the tools coming in and out. But like Russ said, even the vocation setting in the schools or the programs, if they have access to tools that could be a threat to the facility, you need a metal detector, and they need to be, going through that, going in and going out. And again, if the number is doable, if you could strip those inmates, I would assume, especially the maintenance inmates, I would believe they should be stripped, because the tools that they have access to can easily aid in a prison escape or a murder or a killing of another inmate, as well as the vocational stuff too. Maybe didn't overlook that, but some of the tools they use in relationship to what they're learning to do, like electrician, carpentry, stuff like that, they also may require a strip, because again, it's a heightened level of concern there, and hopefully the number is doable, but definitely got to have that metal detector in place there. And again, I would like to believe there's a partnership between a strip for that as well, but not all facilities would do that. I would definitely highly recommend that. I would also kind of do this too as well. I don't know if this can happen either, but maybe a dedicated area for those that are in those vocational schools, those that are in that maintenance detail, because again, the access to contraband, God forbid it makes it out of those areas, that dedicated area limits where that contraband can be spread. So if I know, hey, holy crap, the officer did a wrong count and I'm missing this, I could lock down the one unit without affecting the whole facility, and then pour all my resources into that one unit to see if I can figure out where that weapon is. Because that now, to me, it's no longer a tool, it's a weapon. So, and I tell people that, like, okay, when it was in the vocational spot, or when it was in maintenance, let's say it was a hammer, it was a tool. But once it gets smuggled out, it's not a tool no more. It's going to be used as a weapon. So when I tell people, guys, remember, we're not looking for just a hammer. We're not looking for just a screwdriver. We're looking for a weapon that can kill us. So I want heightened awareness and 100% effort on that. Okay, Russ, last one I got, and then if you have any, let me know. I have between prison industries and shops and the main facility itself. So real quick, prison industries and shops are usually, well, yeah, Russ, you want to explain that?
Yeah, so a lot of corrections departments use inmate labor to help bolster the things that they need. Things that come to mind to me are, when I was at San Quentin, we had a furniture shop. We've also have, sometimes places that do basic maintenance or things like that. So they have access to a lot of tools. So when you think about those tools, that going in and out, naturally, that metal detector is going to be a potential way to stop those tools from disappearing, because that's the last thing that you want. And you also want to, be able to, ensure accountability of each and every little, inmate, crew that's going out, that they have the right tools and nothing in excess because of that. One of the things that you find, though, about the industries, the vocations, whatever you want to call it, is those places have the potential to actually manufacture bigger tools or things that they can potentially use to escape or assault people. And so it's especially important that we stop those kind of tools where they can manufacture more weapons, or they can make a box that they can fit inside and mount up to a truck or whatever it is, because I've seen some devious inmates do some things like that. And so anytime we can do that, and this goes with materials too, screws and things like that are important for us to recover as well, and to stop from being moved from one place to another. I hope that made sense.
No, it does. And guys, this is also another heightened area because deliveries that can come through this way. There's just so many concerns when it comes to industry shops. It is a security concern. So definitely the metal detectors aid. I would also recommend, but again, it depends on the numbers, a strip to supplement that, because the tools that they use in these industries could be anything from scissors, even small things that they use to pick locks. So again, having really good metal detector in place at the entrance and exit of these industry shops are important. And again, I'd still have to say the same thing, because of the heightened level of security concern. I would ask for a dedicated unit for that too. It doesn't mean other inmates can't live there, but we know that this area is what houses these industry workers. So at that point here, if there's something that was discovered to be missing from the industry workers, again, we can focus our resources in that one area, and then hopefully we discover what needs to be discovered. Hey, Russ, did I miss anything at all, or?
I'm trying to think, and I think that we covered most of the bases. But you know what? If we did miss something, somebody should tell us and write it below in the comments and make us look silly.
Yeah, but Russ, I think we exhausted a lot. I cannot honestly think. And you said there could be one. I mean, each facility operates different, so we may not even know of certain areas that your facility has.
I just thought of one, and I shouldn't have missed this one because I've used them many times. We're for the most part here, we're talking about the larger metal detectors and the walkthrough stuff. But you know what? We had a lot of yards, with grass and things like that on them. I don't know why, but things that we turned up that were buried all the time, we had metal detectors for that too, to go out there in the middle of the night and recover things that were potentially buried all the time.
Yeah, that's why we'll do a dialogue next time on floater metal detectors, a couple of weeks down the line. Hey, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing, sir?
I think that one thing that people should try and realize, especially if you're really trying to chart these policies and procedures, is that in order to attack this problem, which is contraband, weapons, things made of metal, you have to go at it from a comprehensive level. And so if you don't include metal detectors in that, you're not being comprehensive. There are a lot of things that you can do to slow it down, but I'll tell you what, that's one great tool that will really show you at times just how bad the rest of your policies are if you can't implement those.
Yeah, and guys, the reason why we had this dialogue is it's also good to know the importance of why they're strategically put in that place. I mean, you may have a lot of new boots that are coming in that may not have seen the facility develop to the point where these security measures were needed and implemented. So it's good for you to know when you walk in that, oh, I get why it's here. I get why it's here, because it puts a little urgency in how you react to what needs to be carried out, the duties that you need to carry out. So again, just kind of knowing why these are very good strategic placements. But having said that, I hope you guys enjoyed the dialogue. If you haven't enjoyed the dialogue, let us know. If there's something we can add or make better, I would appreciate you letting us know that. As always, guys, the show is tiered up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.